I'm pretty new to this, but I say keep them open.
Okay. Well, it seems to be
I gotta go with the new guy.
All right, okay. You guys all want that.
Well, no, you as the house should be wanting to keep things open because that's your tradition.
We always have open. We're the guys that aren't afraid of open ever. But I'm just telling you, on a decision like this, it would have probably been helpful. But it's all right.
Is it not gonna happen now?
I don't know. It's up in the air. I have no idea. Are you willing to do it if your dagger's not listening? I feel your vote. Okay. Welcome.
Well, on that note, the Senate had a nice closed-door caucus meeting today to talk about Medicaid expansion. And are you guys going to have your super ultra mega caucus?
Caucus jamboree.
Caucus fest, or
Yeah.
or is it caucus blockus?
Yeah, it could be any of that. I'll tell you, I maintain, and this is me speaking, that my members of my leadership team and members of the House can have different opinions on this. But I believe a decision of this magnitude requires real information, blunt questions, and good information will drive good decisions. The challenge in a public process where the media would be available is that it could have the effect of creating inhibition in terms of hard questions asked, different areas delved into. I think there needs to be an absolute public process throughout what we do up here. The votes are public, the debates on the floor are public. Can we have a season where we can ask each other hard questions, hear real answers, and see if the information that we receive will drive this body to the best decision? And it's not something you've ever heard proposed before, but you've never asked this legislature to find a solution to a federal law and a federal problem that's left this coverage gap. So it's a very unique set of circumstances we find ourselves in. And I don't think that you want lawmakers making this decision without good information. And that's a process, I think, where we could get it. And again, not one we would do on every issue, but I think this is an extreme circumstance. And I think we need to be sure that what we do, because I think you get one shot at it. You don't get I know that there's talk that you can repeal it at any moment. You can King's X and decide to pull back. I don't know that that's improving the human condition to say you're going to provide something and then in a matter of years say, we've changed our mind or we can't do it. I think we better know what we're doing. We better be prepared to back it up.
But are you going to have one, or is it not likely to
It's
happen?
up in the air, Ben. I'm not sure what the climate is out there to have one or not. So I'll leave it up to the Senate to bat around and decide. And we threw it out to our caucus, and at first blush there wasn't an objection to it. But it's a big caucus. It's a big decision. We'll see what happens.
If you have your own caucus on Medicaid expansion, which I think you indicated you hope to do next week, would that be closed?
I don't suspect that the whole experience would be closed. I don't know that this would take place all within one caucus meeting. I think as we hear information and we ask questions, most of this will be in our public caucus, because I think that the information gathering is something that we'd like you to see, that we see ourselves having to weigh. I think it informs this process. As we start to narrow down onto some decisions on what to do, and I think that it would be appropriate to close the caucus towards the end of the caucus experience on this policy issue.
I guess that raises the question, though, when you discuss things openly, are you not discussing them truthfully? Are you not discussing them in a manner that leads to the best decisions? Because you're saying that's why you need to close this one. So is the reverse true? When you do it in the open, it's not good?
You got a teenage daughter. If you have a disagreement with your daughter, you can be in the house and you can have a discussion / debate with your teenage daughter about something that's going on. Take your daughter to dinner. Go in a restaurant. Sit with your daughter at a restaurant with people around and have that same conversation. It's a little more measured. It's probably a little bit more judicious in terms of the conversation that you have. Probably better in many ways to have that conversation at dinner. Take your daughter to dinner and do that. There is a great value in having these caucuses open. That's why you see the House open their caucuses. I'm just going to tell you though, that there are occasions, and in the House they are rare, where the dialogue and the comments made will better inform the process if we can make them in a closed situation. So
you're
I would
comparing,
say that there's great merit to it, but there's some times where you just got to get real, and you've got to have, maybe not in front of an audience, some questions and answers.
you're comparing your members to teenage girls.
Not at all. And I think you'll find some glass half empty scenario there, Lisa. No, I'm not. I'm just saying that that I think if we all think of something in our lives where the conversations we have in different venues, the candidness or what you do can be different depending on where you're at. I think there's just human nature to that.
But the conversations that we tend to have that way affect us and maybe the other person that we're talking to, not the entire state. And the conversations you have up here do affect all of us.
To that point, that's why I think we have to do it, because I'm afraid that if it's a public dialogue, some questions might not be answered, and the conclusions we would make would impact the state, potentially in a negative way. That would be unfortunate. I think that we don't want to, we want to get this right. And we don't want to have circumstances that keep people from maybe expressing a concern or getting a question answered because of the venue we're in, that would lead us to do something that wouldn't be the best decision. So I would say, to your argument, that's why you want to close it, so you can get to the right decision and do right by the constituents we represent.
Let's do 2 more questions.
No,
Just
come on,
start.
he has to get some.
Did you hear the chime?
Yeah, did you
No.
guys have leadership this morning? Joint leadership?
This morning?
Usually you have Tuesdays
Yeah,
and
we did.
Thursdays, right?
Is that this morning? Okay.
Was
How'd that
there,
go?
beyond the Medicaid, I'm assuming you guys had some discussion about path forward on Medicaid. Was there anything else that we should be aware of that, vis-a-vis perhaps non-discrimination or
Gas
There
tax.
wasn't discussions on those fronts.
gas tax?
What about Medicaid? Did you make any progress there with the Senate?
No, I mean,
Oh, just tell us what happened.
the leadership meeting didn't really delve into policy issues for the session. There were some other issues that are technical to the session that needed our input, and it really wasn't a policy discussion in our meeting this morning.
Can we ask quickly about the base budgets? There was a lot of concern expressed on the floor, especially from the minority party, about cutting the budget for public education. Can you talk about that? Are you comfortable with what was done there? Or the point was made that a lot of time was spent making a relatively small cut in the budgets when you're taking away time from really considering a lot of programming issues.
Well, I'll tell you, and maybe the earlier has a perspective you'd like to. I'll just tell you this: there had been talk at some point about doing zero-based budgets, where you start at zero and you build that budget from the ground up. I think looking at 2%, building the last 2% of last year's budget and seeing if the budget from last year satisfied legislative intent, if there are efficiencies within that budget, just 2% of that budget has proven to be pretty involved. And so it really makes the case why in our part-time legislature, you really don't have the time when you're in session to do a zero-based budget process. But the idea that we would test those base budgets and see if there are efficiencies, see if things were followed or appropriated as per legislative intent is a healthy process. And last year, it produced over $70 million of efficiencies. $70 million in the face of a $14 billion budget might not seem like a lot, but those dollars were identified in different committees and they were used as the committees got to appropriate those in ways that made more sense. And so it's kind of a stress test, that process. We want to get those base budgets right. We want to test the premise of last year's budget, not just assume that everything happened the way it was supposed to and it was all fine. I say 2% of that budget is not onerous necessarily, but it gets that committee familiar with that budget and what they're doing. And then, these aren't cuts. What happens next, that's the first phase, that's the first stage. Second stage is that those savings and those efficiencies are still within those committees for appropriation. And then we'll have a third phase after that, and that's the building blocks that will be added getting our colleagues, we, in the state of Utah, we don't have a Ways and Means Committee. We don't have one committee that handles the whole budget. We have unique, there's a few states I think that do it, but we're broken down as a body into sub-appropriation committees, and it allows members of the legislature to better understand those budgets so they can ask those questions. This process we've been through, I think is a smart one to understand those budgets well and identify efficiencies and make sure we're prudent with our taxpayer dollars, even in years of surplus.
I'd like to comment on that. We are not taking money away from public ed. To the contrary, we are adding money. So what we're doing is we're taking the 2% that the committees have identified, and it's going to be allocated back to them. They'll just reprioritize. As the speaker said, we ask them to look at their budgets and say, take 2% of that, and how would you reprioritize it? They'll be given that money back to reprioritize. In addition, we funded growth. So, public ed's coming out better than any of our others, appropriations committees. They're getting around 102% of their base budget. So they're going to be okay. And then also, as the speaker said, they'll get new building blocks and additional money. So they're not being cut.
I understand other budget areas though may end up with a more permanent cut because they did not take the process seriously. Is that the case?
I'll let the speaker address that.
Very nice.
This really is the last question.
These budgets will be worked on. There's been a lot of hard work. Look, this isn't fun. Going back into these budgets, staring at 2% efficiencies, we're asking department heads, we're asking legislative fiscal analysts to really look at these budgets from last year that were passed and find, what savings there might be, where dollars were actually spent. And people have said out loud that it's a hard process to go through. Well, what we want to make sure is that if you've gone and you've done the work and you have found those efficiencies, I think public education is a great example of how they did it last year versus this year. It's been a very different approach this year. The state school board actually drilled in as a board into where they could identify savings or efficiencies. And they worked a lot closer with their sub-appropriations committee. And so that's the way we hope it happens. For those committees that felt like it's hard to do or it wasn't necessary, what do you do in that circumstance? I mean, I think that they'll still have the opportunity to build back, and they'll have the committees that might not have shown the work or the cuts are still hardworking committees. But we just have to make sure that phase of this session is really done, because it's not easy, but it's the right thing to do. So that did impact some of the base budget numbers or what's coming back to committees. But I think at the end of the day, as committees do their work, the right decision will be made.
I'd like to make one other comment about our caucuses, just to follow from what the speaker said. Right now, we don't have any plans to have a combined joint caucus with the Senate. We kicked it around last week. We don't have any plans. They had their Medicaid meeting today. We have yet to have ours. Likely we'll have ours next week. We anticipate that our caucuses will be open, but there may be a portion of it that may not be. But right now, the joint caucus is kind of off the table, and we'll see if that changes.